Thanks very much, Michael, and thank you all. My name is Mike Galvin. I'm Director of the Consulting Group at Sabertree, and I work for the Baltimore Urban Field Station of the U.S. Forest Service Northern Research Station as the ambassador for the Baltimore Urban Waters Partnership. And we're going to talk to you a little bit today about green infrastructure work in Baltimore, primarily associated with our green pattern book. And we had some technical difficulties and had to call some audibles, and I really appreciate Michael's quick thinking and adaptive management to assist me with the presentation today. So if we could, we'll go ahead and go to the first slide. We've only got about 8 of them, so shouldn't be too much of that. Just a little bit of history of Baltimore. The picture on the left is a historic picture of the waterfront in Baltimore from the 1800s. It's been a very big port for a long time. At a certain point in history, Baltimore was reportedly the 3rd biggest city in the U.S. behind New York and Chicago. And as you can see on the right, that population peaked in about the end of World War II. And again, it was primarily steel and a lot of it military related. And after World War II, the population has been declining. And right now, we're at about 620,000 some odd people in the city, where there's infrastructure for about a million two. So that creates some problems. And we'll go to the next slide. So here's the situation that we're trying to manage around today. There's about 30,000 vacant and abandoned lots in Baltimore. A lot of cities are facing this, but as an issue of scale, Cleveland, for instance, has about 20,000. And if you look at the picture on the left, that's the abandoned and vacant lots mapped. That finger of water that heads to the left that you see that ends up about the center of the picture, that's the inner harbor. And if you go to Baltimore today, the inner harbor will be a primary focal point of entertainment and recreation. Great success story, because the inner harbor was where there was a lot of industry during that peak that we looked at. The middle branch, what some people call the second harbor that you see to the south and west of the inner harbor, was in the 1800s the kind of country bucolic waterfront in Baltimore. But as that population peak and industry grew, industrialization crept around from the inner harbor into the middle branch, and today it's a reverse story, where the middle branch is pretty industrial still, and the inner harbor has largely been converted to commercial and residential and retail. These red dots here are the vacant and abandoned properties located. As you see on the right, an example, it's largely row house construction. Those red blocks with the X's on them, there for the fire department. They're there to indicate if this building is on fire, please don't go inside and try to put it out, because the building will collapse on you and kill you. Just let it burn. There's a huge amount of these areas in Baltimore, and again, you know, what to do with these structures. Many of them can't be inhabited, they can't be rehabbed, and so it poses a great difficulty. There's a real legacy here. If you look at these, where these red dots play out spatially in the landscape, it's largely the area that was redlined by the insurance industry in the early 1900s. They considered those areas to be too high of a risk to insure the properties. Their reasoning largely for taking that insurance position was the risk was because they were largely African-American communities. So there's a history of environmental injustice and economic disinvestment that has turned into a widespread burden a century later. That legacy laying out in the landscape in a very negative way. Next slide, please. So these 30,000 vacant and abandoned lots are kind of the big picture issue that we're trying to help move forward on in Baltimore. And the Green Pattern Book is tools developed by the Baltimore City Office of Sustainability with funding from the U.S. Forest Service Northern Research Station. It's part of the Mayor's Growing Green initiative, and the image on the left is the cover of the Green Pattern Book, which is available online on the Office of Sustainability's website. If you look at the middle image, that's a page from the Green Pattern Book that provides 8 typologies of types of greening projects that can be done on these vacant and abandoned lots. There's really 7 different ones. The 8th one is called mixed greens. It's any combination of the 7 preceding ones. And this book is intended to work in concert with the city's housing typology, working very closely with the Department of Housing and Community Development. Say, for example, there is an area in the city that is in a transitional state, and it is adjacent to a regional choice or desirable market neighborhood. We would not want to make any long-term investments on that because of its adjacency. The hope would be that within a couple of years, that transitional area would be absorbed into the desirable area, and a developer would want to take it and convert it over. There are some parts of the city that are in distressed markets that are not adjacent to or even close to desirable housing markets, and it's not thought that they will be invested in for development purposes any time in the near future. Those are candidates for more long-term greening strategies, sometimes in combination with gray strategies for engineering stormwater solutions, or for community gardens and things like that. We wouldn't want a long-term investment by the community or the city in a property that were going to be converted by the private sector in the following few years, because that would just cause a lot of bad feelings among the parties. The image to the right is showing some of the way this plays out in the landscape. One of the big issues with vacancy and abandonment is people don't do it strategically. So, when you have row housing, you've basically got one block that's essentially one house. It's one structure. And sometimes people leave on the end, sometimes they leave in the middle, sometimes they leave in the center, sometimes it's like a checkerboard. When you can get a block at a time of vacancy or abandonment, that's a good candidate depending on where it fits in the housing typology for redevelopment, but we're not always that fortunate. So this kind of spatial configuration also goes into how much sunlight does it get, whether you could put a hoop house on it, what type of intervention for greening purposes you're going to do on that property. Next slide, please. So in the Baltimore Urban Waters Partnership, we have a bunch of great partners, and as we talked about the progress of the Green Pattern Book in our meetings, EPA Region 3 came forward and said, we really like the Green Pattern Book, and we would like to support you in it. We'd like to make an investment, but we would like it to be something concrete, something we can touch. So could we talk about that? And began to have conversations with Baltimore City Office of Sustainability and the Department of Public Works. EPA offered $100,000 to support this, and in the discussions with Baltimore City, the city not only came up with a plan, but said, we really appreciate your partnership so much, and we like this project so much that we're also going to commit $100,000 to match yours. Those two entities then went to the Chesapeake Bay Trust, which is a statewide NGO in Maryland. It's a grant-making entity, and they said, you guys do grants for a living. We would like you to administer this grant process for you. And the trust said, we'll be happy to do that. Not only will we do that, but we also think this is a great project, and we're going to match what each of you have done. So we're going to have a total of $300,000 in grant money to administer this design competition. One of the exciting and unique things about this design competition is that it required that members of the community and members of design professionals were involved in every submitting team. So they didn't want design professionals coming up with some grandiose vision that nobody who lived around that would want in their neighborhood. They also didn't want community members to get together and come up with something that was not constructible. So this created an opportunity for technical assistance to communities that wasn't possible by any other mechanism. So we really thought that was a really unique and exciting feature. The Department of Housing and Community Development identified specific lots, again going back to the housing typology, that designs could be done for. So that list of designs and maps of those designs were provided to the design teams. They got some technical assistance in their submissions. In fact, they were required to attend a session of technical assistance from the administering entities in order to be eligible to submit a project. And the competition was finalized in September. We now have our awardees. If we could go to the next slide. This might get a little tricky. I'm going to ask you if you could to click on that link, and hopefully we should get a website coming up from that. We'll have to scroll down a little bit through it. This is Mayor Rawlins Blake, and if we could, on the right-hand side, just scroll down the page, and we're going to stop and look at a few of the designs as we get to them. These are some of the examples. The first one in Druid Heights Community Development Corporation has some pervious paving, rain gardens, things like that in a public recreation space. The next one is the Chesapeake Bay Foundation was the lead on. They're a regional NGO in the Chesapeake Bay. And again, their primary feature in their winning design is a stormwater feature in the center with a garden and a park space around it. Below that, Civic Works, which is an NGO that some of you may be familiar with, has a green parking project. So it's a parking facility that also manages stormwater. That's a pretty cool project. The next one below that is by Real Food Farm. They're an urban ag enterprise that operates an urban farm in the city. And this project was really out of the box. This triangle where they're putting this is not only going to be a spectacular floral display in a very blighted area of the city, but it is also going to serve as the first cut flower production facility in Baltimore. So that's a really unique use. We've only got a couple more. There were only 7 winning designs. This is another urban ag facility, Jane's House of Inspiration Fruit Garden. And it's also got a micro bioretention area in addition to the urban ag aspect. That's followed by another garden facility. And as you can see, many of these are either horticultural gardens or food gardens combined with some type of stormwater feature. And that's what we see here in this horticultural garden space that also has bioretention. And the final award-winning in Hollins is a combination of public art and community open space. So some really interesting designs, and that's what we have for those, but I wanted to share those with you very quickly so you have some idea of what those designs look like. And now we're going to go back to the presentation if we could.
Okay, working on that here.
Yeah, sorry.
Hang on.
I think down at the bottom it may be they're on the web. The web, if you click up to what's open, the icon for Internet Explorer, it should have a flash icon. Yes.
Maybe that?
That's it, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And so we'll go to the next slide. So that's the green pattern book. The awarding is done. The teams have to submit a 30% conceptual design to be eligible. They're going to get funded to complete their designs by the end of the year, and then they're going to go through permitting, and they're going to receive funding to implement the project in the spring, and the projects are to be constructed and installed by September 2015. So that's the timeline for that. We're excited about it. The city's excited about it. They were trying to look at how to approach this systematically, and this grant process is a great mechanism to involve the community in a design competition and get some of these green infrastructure projects built. There's one other thing I wanted to share with you. If we could go to the next slide, it's another exciting and related part of the work in Baltimore. There's a nonprofit called Humanum that has a program called Details. The city historically did what a lot of cities with this problem did. They would, when they had abandoned buildings to demolish, they would dig a big hole, they would push the structure into the hole and cover it up to try to avoid landfill costs. That makes that particular lot then pretty much useless for passive stormwater management. So these folks figured out that they can deconstruct rather than demolish properties, and they can recover approximately 3,000 bricks, 400 square feet of flooring, and 800 board feet of framing lumber from each recovered unit. So they've got a contract with the city to deconstruct 50 row houses, and these are some photos of the work they're doing. There's about 8 units there. You see in the center picture, they separate them into sticks and bricks, as they say. They scrape all the mortar off the bricks, stack them, palletize them, and band them for shipment and resale. They do the same thing with the framing lumber and with the flooring. They've got markets for this stuff. They sell it. And the employees there, Details, is a program of Humanum. It's a NGO that works with workforce development and social enterprise. The people who work in this program are people in transition from the criminal justice system. We found that these people will be given a second job by most employees, but there aren't any employees that will give them a first job. So the primary function here is to teach these folks job skills, but also to give them a demonstrated track record that they can show up, every day, that they can show up on time, and they can be good employees. And Details is doing work not only in Baltimore now, but also in New Jersey and in New York. It's a great success story. I'm not sure we have time for it here, but if we could pull it up for a second, the local national public radio station in Baltimore, WYPR, did a great piece on this program. After the deconstruction is complete, that block area of 35 row homes is going to be regraded, and it's going to be planted with trees and become an urban forest area in the city. So it's a great green jobs, community greening project there. Humanum is a great partner. We're really fortunate to have them working with us in Baltimore. So I wanted to highlight those two things, the Growing Green competition and the Humanum deconstruction project, the two kind of fundamental components of our work in Baltimore. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you today.